everyone, and welcome to Daily Newspaper Analysis, which is presented to you by Losico. So, today we will discuss two articles. The first one is from The Hindu, which is titled as It's Time to Enact a Siras Act. Basically, this article talks about giving ex post facto pardon to those who were accused under Section 377 of IPC. So, what is it, and what are the requisites required under the Siras Act, and why is it called as the Siras Act, shall be discussed in this article. The second article is from the Indian Express, which is titled as Scale It Up, Roll It Out. So this talks about that what kind of an expansive, that is a massive and at a bigger scope level, can be used to put in the vaccine delivery system in the country, and what steps can be taken to ensure that the vaccines are delivered to all within given time. And finally, we have the News in Flash column. Before moving further, let's have a look at the Project Maverick, which is almost free CLAT preparation course of Losico. So if you're preparing for CLAT 2021 or 2022, you can enroll yourself for this course just for ₹100. And the link to this course is available in the description box below. With this, let's see what is the multiple choice question from yesterday's discussion. Manas National Park is located in, your options are Arunachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Gujarat, or Assam. You can write down your answer in the comment section below. This is the descriptive question of the day. Decriminalization of homosexuality is definitely a step forward in ensuring basic human rights. Discuss the stance of the Supreme Court in this direction. With this, let's start a discussion for the first article, which is about the Siras Act. So there has been an increasing demand for a Siras Act providing for ex post facto pardon to those convicted under Section 377 of IPC since the mysterious death of Professor Siras in 2010. Here, three things are the ones that have to be put our focus on. The first one is that what do we mean by the Siras Act, and why at all have we named this particular act as the Siras Act? The second one is that what do we really mean by the ex post facto pardon? And thirdly, what is Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code? So firstly, let's understand what is the Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. As we know that this Section 377 provided for criminalization of the homosexuality, which means if at all any person would consummate or would get into a relationship that could be a physical relationship with a person that belongs to the same gender, then that person was convicted under this Section 377 under the crime of homosexuality. Now, definitely, when at one place we consider ourselves to be way forward and the ones to be, promoting the equal rights and also promoting broad-minded thinking, and when we try to compete with other nations at the global level, it became a real blot on the system and on the entire criminalization system or the entire criminal system of the country. Because wherein at one place we talk about giving equal rights to every individual, Section 377 was very arbitrary in its nature, because it did not recognize homosexuality and rather it treated it to be as an offense, and that too a criminal one. That is why the Supreme Court, through various cases, we'll see them in detail on the later stage, it decriminalized Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, so wherein now homosexuality is no more a crime in India. Though it has been silent whether or not they can marry, but also we can deduce that the right to marriage has not been yet given to these couples, but still they can cohabitate and they can live together with consent of each other. Thus, Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code is no more a criminal offense. Now, when we talk about the ex post facto pardon, it means to give pardon in the retrospective sense. Now, by that we mean that, for example, a law comes into force on today's date, that is 15th April 2021. So generally, that law will be applicable for the days that are to follow. That is from 15th April 2021 to any date that would fall after this date. But in some situations, a law can be said that it would be functioning with the retrospective effect. That means even before the date that law had commenced, that effect of that law will prevail. So similarly, since the time Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code has been decriminalized, this act, which is the Siras Act, has been asking that the decriminalization of Section 377 should be done in an ex post facto manner, which means it should have a retrospective effect, and thus pardon should be granted to those as well who were convicted under Section 377 even before the decriminalization system. So that is why this is called as the ex post facto pardon, and the Siras Act is because it is named after Professor Siras, whose mysterious death in AMU, that is Aligarh Muslim University, in the year 2010, has brought this question to to the entire vision of every person. For that, we need to understand a little idea about the Professor Ramchandra Siras case. So basically, he was a professor and head of the Department of Modern Indian Languages at Aligarh Muslim University. In the year 2010, he was suspended by the AMU for gross misconduct after being caught having consensual sex with another man. Now, in such a scenario, he had been charged of homosexuality under Section 377, but since till then, by then, homosexuality had been decriminalized, he won his case against AMU in the Allahabad High Court and also got his job back. But he mysteriously died on April 7th, 2010. And thus, this mysterious death of Professor Siras has brought this question again back to the forefront, that Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code should be exercised with an ex post facto effect, and thus all those who were convicted even before the decriminalization of this particular offense, they also should be given a pardon. Also, we have seen that the Hansal Mehta's movie Aligarh had portrayed the social ostracism and mental trauma that was suffered by Professor Siras. Similarly, we have the Alan Turing Law, which was brought in 2017 in the United Kingdom. So basically, this has been named after Alan Turing, who was a computer scientist and he was convicted of gross indecencies in 1952 during the times of World War II. But this law grants amnesty and pardon to those convicted of consensual same-sex relationships. And similarly, these kinds of laws are also sought forward in countries like India as well. And if we talk about the status of the homosexuality under Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code and the stand that the Supreme Court has taken, so in 2009, the Supreme Court decriminalized homosexual acts involving consenting adults in the Nas Foundation versus NCT of Delhi. Then in 2013, the Supreme Court reinstated Section 377 in Suresh Kumar Kaushal versus Nas Foundation. So in a way, in 2009, though Supreme Court had decriminalized it, but still it was again reinstated to the status of being a criminal offense in 2013, back in the case of Suresh Kumar Kaushal versus Nas Foundation. But finally, in the year 2018, it was decriminalized in the case of Navtej Singh Johar and others versus Union of India. And so the current status of Section 377 stands to be decriminalized. And thus, it would be really ideal and the justice can be delivered in the real sense if Section 377 shall have the ex post facto pardon system, and all the people convicted before decriminalization shall also be granted the pardon. With this, let's discuss the second article for the day, which talks about expansive, equitable, and steady vaccination drive. Please note here that here the word expansive is not the word expensive, which would mean costly or something that is not pocket friendly. Rather, it means expansive, which means at a wider scope or at a greater or wider level. So this article says that when we talk about the vaccination drive that is being taken care of in the country, we need to make it more expansive. That means we need to expand the scope of the vaccination drive, and we need to make it more equitable and steady in nature. So as of April 10th, India has delivered more than 100 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine, and it has become the fastest country to reach this mark. But still, keeping in mind the requirements of the entire population and the size of the population, there is still a huge need to scale up vaccination delivery speed. For this purpose, 3 pillars for steady vaccination drive have been suggested in this article. The first one is product availability, the second is trained vaccinators, and the third is vaccination centers. So to discuss in detail, the product availability here means that we require the requisite financial resources, specialized and skilled human resources and systems for this particular thing to be taken care of. So, following the good manufacturing practices, it needs to be made sure that the product. Now, the product here is definitely the COVID-19 vaccine, and in India we have the Covishield and we have the COVID Covaxin, which are very important products, and these are the ones that have to be delivered to the public at large. And thus, we should make sure that smooth flow of availability of product is made up. The second one is having trained vaccinators. Now, obviously, when these vaccines have to be given to the people, they have to be administered to the people. Not every other person like you and I, who does not have an expertise in this particular direction, will be able to administer these vaccines to the people. Rather, we need a completely trained workforce of vaccinators to carry out this purpose. And thus, universal immunization program workforce would not be enough to roll out COVID vaccines. And thus, training must be robust and complete in order to bring in more professionals and completely trained vaccinators for taking care of this entire project. And thus, active collaboration between doctors, nurses, ASHA workers. Several times we have discussed about the ASHA workers, that are the accredited social health activist workers, who mostly are women in India, and technicians from private facilities must come together, and thus this entire program of vaccine delivery can be taken care of. And thirdly, when we talk about the vaccination centers, so these centers should be accessible and acceptable. Now, for example, this vaccine, let's say, has to be delivered into a very remote area. And thus, the vaccination centers are not available close to the people. In such a situation, it will be very difficult for the people to move to the cities or faraway places to get the vaccines administered. And also, it might cause problems in transportation, as there might be lack of the resources of transportation, and even maybe they do not have their own vehicles. And thus, keeping in mind the physical distancing norm, they would not be allowed to travel even for this purpose. And it would become practically impossible for them to get the vaccine administered to themselves. And thus, we need to have adequate space for mandatory monitoring, and thus all the kinds of infrastructure, be it the workforce, be it the products that are the vaccines, or be it the centers for vaccination, needs to be there. So when we talk about the vaccine equity, it says that although it is important to prioritize the vulnerable sections, the need of the hour is also to vaccinate an increasing number of citizens. Now, as we said, that in the first initial days of the vaccine rolling out, the people or the workforce or the kinds of people that are more prone to catch this particular virus, like the doctors, the police personnel, etc., they are at a greater risk, or even the elderly people, the old age people, they are at a greater risk of catching this virus. And thus, a priority definitely should be given to them when this vaccine has to be given. But that cannot be the only purpose of the vaccination drive. And thus, in the long run, our main purpose should also be to vaccinate an increasing number of citizens and finally cover all the citizens at large. So we are done with this, and let's see what do we have for news in flash today. Digital Kala Festival. The Delhi government has launched the first edition of the Baba Saheb Ambedkar Digital Kala Festival, which is a week-long exhibition marking the 130th birth anniversary of social reformer and revolutionary Bhim Rao Ambedkar. So please keep in mind that the Delhi Kala Festival, or the Digital Kala Festival, is being celebrated in commemorating the 130th birth anniversary of Bhim Rao Ambedkar. Second, Denmark bans AstraZeneca. As we know that AstraZeneca also is one of the vaccines for COVID-19. Now it has been banned by Denmark, as it has become the first country to drop the vaccine over suspected but rare serious side effects of the vaccine. The move comes against the strong recommendations from the WHO and European Medicines Watchdog to continue using the vaccine, as benefits far outweigh the potential risk, but still Denmark has chosen to put down the use of AstraZeneca. And thirdly, NATO, that is North Atlantic Treaty Organization, to exit Afghanistan along with the United States. So nearly 10,000 US and NATO troops will return, as the alliance has achieved a goal to prevent the terrorists from using Afghanistan as a safe haven. And since now the peace deal is at a better position between Afghanistan and United States, these troops are moving out from Afghanistan. So this was all for the day. We hope it was a good and informative session for you all. Thank you so much for staying tuned with Law Seekho. Please subscribe to our channels for such more daily updates to come.